Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 400 of TowerGate. 400. That's another milestone, I think. Sunday, April the 15th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in to the weekend edition, the Sunday evening TowerGate video. My oh my, got some things to talk about here, some breaking news headlines, and also we're going to talk a little bit about the Dishonorable James Comey. A little review, if you will. I think you'll enjoy it. This morning, Bob Goodlatte was on Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo, and she pressed him on criminal referrals. And the only thing he would say is that he has tools, they have tools that they can use to get what they want. He's referring to the 1.2 million documents, the emails that, the documents about Hillary Clinton emails that they're looking for, and also the Comey memos. Now, Devin Nunes on Friday went a little bit farther, telling Fox News that they already have impeachment papers drawn up, and that he has notified both Wray and Rodenstein of this fact, and that if he doesn't get the Comey memos on Monday morning, they are going to move to impeach both Rodenstein and Wray. So my guess is they're going to get the Comey memos on Monday morning. As far as how many of these 1.2 million documents they can get, it's my understanding that Mr. Lausch is the guy that's doing the final editing. He's looking at everything before it gets released to make sure that they don't release anything that might be evidence in a criminal trial. And that's primarily what he's doing. Now, Goodlatte told Bartiromo that he's had a couple meetings with Mr. Lausch to discuss this, and he feels pretty good about the fact that they're going to start getting this. But you know, Goodlatte's kind of a laid-back old guy. I think he's fairly straight shooter and that type of thing, but he's fairly laid back. Devin Nunes and I think Charles Grassley will be the ones to apply the most pressure, particularly Nunes. He will bring impeachment against Rosenstein and Wray if he doesn't get what he wants. He's already threatened it. Now this will be the second time. The first time it worked. I believe it will work again, and I believe after he gets the 7 memos, he will go to work on these emails. Goodlatte told Bartiromo that he expects that they'll start receiving more dumps of these emails of the 1.2 million and the Hillary Clinton emails, that they will start receiving this sometime this week. But he did say that when Maria Bartiromo was pressing him on how it is possible that Flynn and Papadopoulos and others have been charged and prosecuted for lying to the FBI, why McCabe has not been charged for lying to the FBI, based on the fact that the recent IG report on McCabe's firing clearly shows he lied 4 times, including 2 times under oath. And so Bartiromo is pressing Goodlatte on why McCabe has not been charged for making false statements, lying to the FBI. And he really didn't have much of an answer to that, but he did say that they're waiting on more material to come out from the IG. Why, I don't know. They have enough to charge McCabe right now. But he did say, as we all know, that Congress can make criminal referrals based on the IG report. And he didn't say if they expect to do that, but that's, you know, typical of a politician. They don't like to make predictions and things and such, because it puts them in a situation where they may have to defend themselves later. But I think Nunes will go farther than that and say, yeah, we absolutely will make criminal referrals. Trey Gowdy would probably say that. And I suspect even Grassley would say, yeah, we would make criminal referrals if we find there was criminal activity. Right now, the word is being used, the word that we're hearing is misconduct or bad conduct or something. It was more than bad conduct. He lied 4 times, 2 times under oath. That's a crime. He should be and better be charged, or there's going to be a little over 50 million very angry Trump supporters demanding equal justice under the law. Mr. Goodlatte. Well, McClatchy is back at it. They are back at it. On Friday night, they came out and wrote a story, published a story, saying that Mueller has proof that Michael Cohen was in Prague, just as the dossier had stated. Cohen, of course, came out and immediately denied it again, and says over and over again, I have denied this, and it's been proven. I was in California with my son looking at colleges. This is proven. Now, the McClatchy article doesn't really give any hard sources. It just gives that word sources say, but they don't list any sources. And even in the story, McClatchy says that they believe that Cohen was there sometime between August and September. Well, if you can only narrow it down to 2 months and you can't even say what day or even where this was supposedly went down or how it went down, clearly you don't have very good sources or much evidence to prove it. It's just another, I don't know if this is a leak coming out of Mueller's team. I don't know if this is just McClatchy trying to stir up some more crap. Who knows? But no one else has been able to corroborate that. But you can bet all weekend long other news organizations have been trying to corroborate that fact. But at this point, this McClatchy story, which took off on Friday night and got literally reposted a billion times on Twitter and Facebook, is still being denied by Cohen, and there's still no proof of this. And so McClatchy is at it again. Wouldn't believe anything I read coming out of McClatchy. They have a long history of publishing fake news. Madeleine Not So Bright, the former Secretary of State of the Crooked Peckard, husband of the rotten Reverend Clinton, Slick Willie himself. Madeleine Not So Bright, his former Secretary of State, recently over the weekend in an interview compared the Trump administration to Nazis and Soviet communists. That's right. What do you say we take a little trip into the Wayback Machine? Let's go back to May 12th of 1996 on 60 Minutes when Leslie Stahl was interviewing Madeleine Not So Bright, Madeleine Half Bright, and she was talking about these sanctions on Iraq, which involved and included sanctions on food, medicine, and even baby formula. And these sanctions led to the deaths, according to the UN, of over 500,000 children. A genocide. It was her policy, Madeleine Half Bright, her policy, her genocidal policy, which caused the death of these over 500,000 Iraqi kids and babies. Let's go back and relive that for just a moment. Here is the direct question and answer. Leslie Stahl, quote, "We have learned that 500,000 children have died in Iraq. I mean, that's more children that died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?" Unquote. Madeleine Half Bright responded by saying, "I think this is a very hard choice, but the price is worth it." There you go. Madeleine Half Bright. Nazis? Soviet communists? Oh, we don't have to go back that far in history, Madeleine Half Bright. We only have to go back to 1995 and your sanctions on food, medicine, and even baby formula, which led to the death of over 500,000 innocents, children, and even babies. You might want to rethink that, Madeleine Half Bright, who the real Nazi and Soviet communist were. Wasn't Trump. He opposed that. Paul Big Ears Eddie Munster Ryan says James Comey is a man of integrity. That speaks for itself. An independent lab in Switzerland says that the poison used in the Skripal attack in the UK was produced somewhere in the US or the UK. The Rotten Reverend is pledging to campaign for the Democratic National Committee to fundraise for them, is what that means, for the 2020 Democratic Party contenders. I bet she thinks she's going to be one of them. That's what she's going to be raising all that money for. You think the Rotten Reverend's going to be out there raising money for the DNC? She left him bankrupt. Do you think the Rotten Reverend, she took over the DNC? You think the Rotten Reverend is concerned about those 2020 candidates? Hell no. The Rotten Reverend Clinton's out raising money because she believes in 2020 she can run again. Watch and see. Russia says it has the evidence that the Syrian chemical attack was staged by the UK. Maybe they do. It'll never see the light of day. Do you think that they'll read that document at the EU? Won't even see the light of day. Maybe they have the evidence, but believe me, no one in the Western media is going to cover it, and if they do, they'll dismiss it and say it's bullshit. Just more from the communist dictator Putin and the Russians. Can't trust them to tell the truth. Hillary's husband, the crooked peckered, slick Willie Jefferson Clinton Blythe, was recently photographed in Chicago on Michigan Avenue, standing there at the corner with his zipper completely down. I saw the photo. It's pretty disturbing. And he's standing there, he's got his zipper down, and he's checking out hardcore these two very young girls who are walking by him. And he's checking them out, standing there with his fly completely open, looking at him like some kind of a perv. He literally looks, the only thing he's missing is the raincoat. They probably didn't even know who he is. They walked right by him. Didn't even notice him. Then, apparently, he took a walk down by the river. I don't know if any of you have been to Chicago or around Michigan Avenue, over by where the water tower thing is there. Then he's walking around with his fly open, talking to, I guess, young women. So I guess he's trying to pick up some hot chicks in Chicago. Probably had a hotel room there, was trying to pick up some chicks. Maybe that's his technique for how he picks up chicks. He walks around, I'm Bill Clinton. I used to be president. Look, my fly's open. You want to help me out with that? Yep, that's the slick, crooked peckered Willie Jefferson Blythe Clinton, accused rapist, husband of the Rotten Reverend, doing what he does naturally, perving out on young girls. What a sick, sick individual he is. Lock him up, along with his crooked wife. A federal judge has halted the Department of Justice lawyers from looking at the Trump papers seized during the Michael Cohen raid. Well, that's a victory, but do you think that they haven't already looked at a lot of that? Do you think that they're not going to look at that? And when do you think that the information that they've looked at, that they're now not allowed to look at, but they're going to look at anyway, when do you think we're going to be hearing about some of that? I think that will be put into the safe, and it will be leaked out at various times leading up to the 2018 campaign, probably throughout the summer, and they'll even hold back some of the real juicy stuff for 2020. We will be hearing all about what they learned. Yes, the judge halted the actions, but quite honestly, they've already confiscated this stuff, and they knew this was coming, and they probably have already had dozens and dozens of people photocopy every bit of it. Probably 15 or 20 lawyers have every bit of this, stacks and stacks of it in their briefcases, and they'll be studying it for months, and it will come out in the form of leaks. That's how the things work with these scum-sucking lawyers in D.C. who are still pursuing the coup. The Dishonorable James Comey. The Dishonorable James Comey is afflicted with many bad things. The Dishonorable Dirty Cop James Comey is afflicted with narcissistic personality disorder, otherwise known as NPD. It's also known as the God complex. Symptoms are a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. A person with a God complex, like the Dishonorable James Comey, will have a inflated feelings of personal ability, privilege, or infallibility. A person with a God complex may refuse to admit the possibility of error or failure. This individual, the Dishonorable James Comey, may disregard the rules of society and require special consideration or privileges. Comey's book is called Higher Loyalty. It's clear that the only higher loyalty Comey has is himself. Comey's history is lies, contradictions, and dishonesty. He lied under oath to Congress when he told Congress the dossier was salacious and unverified, but did not tell the Congress that he had used the dossier to get a FISA warrant on Carter Page to spy on the Trump team, or that Trump was a target of an FBI investigation that began in July of 2016. He also lied when he told Trump to his face that he wasn't under investigation when he was. A history of lies. You lied, Dishonorable James Comey, Lurch, when you told Congress that you never leaked or authorized leaks to the media or anyone else. You said no and never, under oath. You lied, Dishonorable Jim. And on Monday, Nunes, Grassley, and Goodlatte, that's tomorrow, will be getting those leaked memos, and 4 of them are classified. And we know that because it's in Grassley's letter to the IG. Watching some clips of the Stephanopoulos and James Comey lying session, and it's absolutely amazing. I want to give you the exact question and answer from Stephanopoulos, and you can see, as I said in the previous video, when you look at Stephanopoulos' face and his actions and the way he's looking and talking when he asks this question, even he is disturbed by the Dishonorable James Comey and his actions. Stephanopoulos, quote, "Did the president have a right to know that?" And what he's talking about is, did he have a right to know that the Rotten Reverend Clinton paid for the dossier? So Stephanopoulos looks at Comey and says, didn't he have a right to know that? Comey says, that it was financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. You don't know the answer to that. You don't know the answer to that. Don't think it would have been, somewhat, important to mention to Trump that the dirt that you're giving him from the lies put together by the Rotten Reverend Clinton and Sidney Blumenthal and Cody Shearer and Nellie and Bruce and Glenn and Mary and all the folks, you never thought that it would be important to mention to Trump when you're telling him about this, what you're describing as intelligence, when in fact it was opposition research, that it might have been somewhat important to mention to him that it came from the Rotten Reverend Clinton as opposition research for an October surprise, a political hit piece. You didn't think that was important, Jim? I don't believe you. Liar. He also didn't tell the FISA judge that either, which is a gross violation of the FISA court rules and processes. Comey admits in the book that, quote, when I thought she was going to win, I didn't want a tainted president. In other words, a politicized decision. And he's talking about reopening the email investigation after discovering the dick pics and the classified information on the laptop of Anthony Weiner's, on Anthony Weiner's computer. It was a political decision, and he admitted it right there in the book. He also admits to playing along with Loretta Lynch's order to call the investigation a matter. Also a politicized maneuver, while declaring in the book that he does not politicize investigations. despite the fact that he admits to doing it twice, at least. Probably more as we get the book. I'm sure we'll learn more. That is also known, by the way, as obstruction of justice, Jim. It's a crime. And to say that you didn't want a tainted president? Oh, Lordy, Jim, you're making me queasy. Didn't want a tainted president, so you thought, man, what do I do? Do I reopen this investigation? Because I don't want a tainted president. All the polls say that the rotten Reverend Clinton is going to win. And if she wins and becomes president, I don't want this out there because she could be tainted. No, Jim, you didn't want it out there because you thought she was going to win, and you knew that she would probably fire your ass and bust your balls at the same time. That's why you made that political decision, but you had to release him because the New York detectives wouldn't go along with your plan. They were going to out you, Jim, and you had no choice. You tried to cover it up. You sat on it for 5 weeks. Did not want a tainted president. So you're using the phony dossier to get FISA warrants to spy on his team. You're running an investigation on him that started in July 2016 that you did not inform him or the Congress of when you were under oath of the Congress and speaking to the Trump personally on January 9th at Trump Tower as you were briefing him, nor did you mention to him that it was political opposition research. You're working a soft coup against the president. Now you're out there writing a tell-all book full of lies, but you don't want to taint the presidency. That too speaks for itself, does it not? You, Lurch, Comey, are the world's biggest liar, literally. You, Jim, oversaw the small group. That's primary function was to bury the Clinton email investigation and cover it up. You were over Andy McCabe, Jim. And he says that you knew all about the things he was doing as the leader of the scheme team, including all the leaking, Jim. You, Jim, along with Andy, only reopened the Clinton email investigation because the NYPD detectives knew and were refusing to cooperate with you in keeping it hush-hush. They were going to out you, Jim. The fact is, and you failed again to tell the Congress that you knew about the laptop of Anthony's wiener 5 weeks before you reopened the investigation. Sat on it for 5 weeks, Jim. You tried to cover it up. That's what the evidence will show. That is also a crime, Jim. Beam him up, Scotty. Right to Leavenworth. You, Jim, exonerated the rotten Reverend Clinton before you ever interviewed her and 37 other witnesses. The rotten Reverend transferred classified information, including 22 SAP programs, onto a personal server that was unencrypted and unsecure. That, Jim, is a crime. And you, Jim, obstructed justice by fixing it and covering it up. Then, Dishonorable James Comey, you overstepped your authority when you exonerated the rotten Reverend Clinton. The FBI director is not authorized to make that decision. The FBI investigates the crimes, and then they give their findings to the AG. Then the AG decides what to do. That's how it works, Jim. Lynch, of course, recused herself because of the tarmac meeting with Hillary's husband. So, the decision should have been with the deputy AG, silly Sally Yates, who you will likely be pen pals with when you're both in Sing Sing, Jim. You, Dishonorable James Comey, prosecuted Martha Stewart while letting a real mob boss, the rotten Reverend Clinton, off the hook. You said Stewart was guilty of conspiracy, obstructing justice, and lying to investigators. But in Crooked Hillary's case, Jim, you never observed any conspiracy, any obstruction of justice, or lying to investigators. Yeah, right, Jim. And what were the stakes in the Martha Stewart case? What were the stakes in the Martha Stewart case? 4,000 shares of pharma stock that she sold. And why, Jim, did you brief the president on the dossier on January 9th, Jim? Was it so BuzzFeed would have legal cover to publish it? Because once you brief the president, it now becomes a news story. Prior to that, it wouldn't have been. Had you not briefed the president, it wouldn't have been. Who coordinated that? Because you briefed the president on January 9th, and on January 10th, BuzzFeed published it. Of course, BuzzFeed's now being sued by 5 different people. The 3 Russian oligarchs of Alpha Bank, Michael Cohen, and Mr. Gubarev. Because he published the dossier, which was bullshit that he couldn't prove. Had BuzzFeed published a story saying that the FBI director briefed the president on some salacious material that may be blackmail information that the Russians had, you probably would have been fine, BuzzFeed. But you published the entire dossier, which made direct claims, naming names of of Alpha Bank and the 3 oligarchs who own it, Mr. Gubarev and Mr. Cohen, all who are suing your asses off, BuzzFeed, and who are going to win. Are you having any luck, BuzzFeed, getting the DNC to turn over all the documents from the investigation of their servers? My guess is you're not. My guess is the judge is going to shoot that down again. Pretty soon, BuzzFeed is going to pay, along with a lot of other people. Maybe Inspector General Horowitz, the custodian, can clean all that up for us, Jim. And where did it all go wrong for James Comey? Well, apparently it all began because he got a wedgie. You are going to prison, Jim, just like Martha Stewart did. You, Jim, committed many crimes, including participating, playing a key role in the frame-up and the attempted soft coup in 2016, and it continues to this day. And now you're trying to cover up and cover your ass. But IG Horowitz has a job to do. Horowitz, the custodian, has to clean up your mess, Jim. Horowitz must try and save the institutions from ruin. And it is your hide, Dishonorable James Comey, that the custodian is going to tan to restore integrity to the institution, along with a lot of your friends. The Dishonorable James Comey. What a despicable human being. You know, for all these years, even going back to Hoover, there's always been this idea that when you leave public service in the DOJ or the FBI or what have you, especially the FBI director, that you do not go out and write a book and talk about the private conversations you had with the president, regardless of how things turned out. There have been other directors who've been fired. There have been other people at the DOJ, attorney generals, have been placed in contempt. Some are named Eric Holder. We are seeing something that's unprecedented. Is it for the first time in the history of our country that I can remember, administration officials, former attorney general, two former attorney generals, the FBI director, the assistant FBI director, other people who served in high-level positions in the Department of Justice, the FBI, the State Department, are out trashing a sitting president. This is unprecedented. Never been done before as far as I know. This, unfortunately, sets a new standard. It changes the way presidents will communicate with attorney generals and FBI directors. No longer can they feel that they can sit down now and have an honest conversation with the attorney general or the FBI director without worrying that it's going to show up in a book after they leave their position. Leaders around the world and other people who may want to have confidential conversations with our president from this time forward will now have second thoughts about that, because they don't know if their conversation is going to end up in a book or a movie or in some hit piece. Unbelievable things are occurring. They're unraveling hundreds of years of history. Many things that are critical to national security, critical to the relationship a president must be able to have with the people he confides in on issues of war and peace, law and order, crime and punishment, all these issues. Everything now has to come into question if you're a president. All because of the dishonorable James Comey and his fellow rats. Some are named Lynch, Yates, Holder, McCabe, Powers, Rice, Rhodes. So, that is where we are. And I will be back tomorrow on Monday. And I think that we'll take a little deeper dive into that recent report, the first actual documents that we got, the very beginning of what will be the IG report releases. And we can see now we learned a lot from Friday night. I'm going to talk about the specific things we learned, which are far more detailed, that we learned from the IG report. And it tells us a couple things. Number one, it tells us that the beginning of the releases has begun, and that we can expect the beginning of May, according to the letter that Horowitz sent Grassley, that the primary matters he's investigating, the releases of that will begin in May. We expect that'll be the beginning of May, not the end. But this release tells us a couple other things. It tells us that Horowitz, just as I suspected, is not going to tell us what criminal code or violation there was. He's not going to point out so-called, he's not going to call things crimes. It's not what he's going to describe them as. He's just going to say what happened, but he's not going to say whether they're crimes or this or that or the other thing. He'll probably use the word bad conduct or misconduct or whatever. But that's probably how his report is going to read. But it also tells us, when you look at the details, and we'll be getting down into this in the next video, of the fact we look at the details of what he is telling us on this particular first drop, which is the reason they fired McCabe. You can see that it's a fairly in-depth investigation, and he is not pulling punches. He is telling us exactly what happened. And if what we saw in this first release of the reason McCabe was fired, if we see that kind of detail and that kind of honing in, if that is consistent throughout the releases as we move forward, we're going to learn one hell of a lot of very damaging things, a lot of very criminal things. While the IG may not specify in his reports that something is a particular criminal violation or give the criminal code that was violated, he is going to be very clear, it appears, on exactly what the activities were. And he'll leave it up to, I guess, Mr. Huber or Sessions or Rodenstein, if he's still around. He might not be around after tomorrow if Congress impeaches him. Or the Congress can also do criminal referrals. I think that we are going to get a pretty straight report out of the IG. It'll be very interesting, and we'll be watching. But just this first drop, I think, gives us some insight into what we can expect. And I would say it's mostly positive. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back on Monday. You guys have a good night. Bye.